Meet a little girl who was once an empress in her previous life, betrayed and killed by her own family for the throne. Now reborn, she enrolls in a prestigious academy where she must earn badges through various challenges. She needs to earn 7 badges to get close to the Duke's son and infiltrate the noble household. Will she be able to do it? She was the most breathtaking princess of the royal family, destined to rule the empire. However, her life was tragically cut short on the very eve of her coronation through murder. The conspirators were none other than those closest to her: her younger sister whom she cherished, her lover whom she trusted implicitly, the nephew she had raised with affection, and colleagues she had confided in. In the agonizing darkness of death, resentment consumed her as she desperately prayed to the gods for a second chance. She yearned to reclaim everything that had been stolen from her. When she awoke, her vision focused on a small boy playfully teasing her. She remained expressionless. The little boy, sensing her lack of response, grew anxious and suddenly began to wail loudly, "Mommy, why isn't my sister reacting?" Their mother, Isabella, cried out, her voice filled with guilt. "It's all my fault," she sobbed, "for keeping your little sister in my belly for so long." Their father, Fernando, rushed to Isabella's side to comfort her. His tone, though gentle, was firm as he declared, "Even though Sylvia may not be very bright, she will always be our most precious treasure." Little did they know, this seemingly simple infant was once a master manipulator of nobles, a true puppet master in her past life. Now, reborn as a helpless, fragile baby, those around her mistakenly believed her to be unintelligent. The days following her rebirth stretched on, agonizingly slow. Finally, months into her new life as Sylvia, she overheard news that her nephew, the cruel and despicable one, had ascended to the throne of the empire. Furious, she nearly crushed the baby bottle in her tiny hands. By the age of 3, through the whispers of the maids, Sylvia learned of the betrayals of her past life, her own sister's treachery and her heartless former lover's impending marriage. When she turned 5, she heard more news of that man, the Duke of Wellington, rapidly climbing the ranks of power. Sylvia's small body trembled with rage. Her heart burned with resentment and injustice. Why were her enemies thriving and achieving greatness effortlessly while she was trapped in this weak body, powerless to seek revenge? Fortunately, her father appeared at that moment, holding her close and gently soothing her, which calmed her almost uncontrollable anger. Sylvia could only find solace in silence, resolving within herself, "Okay, I will wait. One day, I will make them all pay dearly for what they have done." That day was beginning to dawn. Lucia, her cousin, enthusiastically insisted that Sylvia attend a school gathering. Initially, Sylvia refused without a second thought, until she heard that young Master Stuart would also be present. Sylvia subtly observed Lucia, who was excitedly presenting this remarkable young master, Stuart Wellington, the youngest son of the Duke of Wellington. A peculiar smile touched Sylvia's lips, a smile that held no warmth. What a familiar name indeed! In that instant, she sensed her long-nurtured plan for revenge was about to unfold. Reincarnated as the young heiress to the empire's wealthiest family, Sylvia had initially imagined an easy path to victory. However, she soon realized she was surrounded by echoes of her past enemies. A classmate was revealed to be the illegitimate child of a former political ally. The little girl who constantly bothered her was the niece of the king's mistress. Through this group, she discovered that her former enemies had prospered after her death, rising to positions of influence, while those who had once shone brightly were now struggling to survive. The empire's #1 knight had been demoted to a mere school security guard, and the renowned royal genius painter had become an ordinary teacher in the countryside. The fire of revenge blazed within Sylvia's heart. Determined, she decided to manipulate this group of young people to infiltrate the heart of power once more. One day, her cousin mentioned that the Duke of Wellington's youngest son would be at the upcoming event. Sylvia knew her opportunity had arrived. This Duke of Wellington, she recalled, had originated from a humble noble family in a border town but had ascended to prominence through the influence of his wife's noble lineage. He was a rising star among the common people, yet Sylvia knew him to be nothing more than an opportunist who had climbed the social ladder through connections. Suddenly, a memory resurfaced in Sylvia's mind from her past life. When she died, Wellington and his wife already had school-aged children. Considering his wife's age then, it seemed unlikely they would have had more children. This mysterious youngest son, therefore, could very well be her own illegitimate child from a past affair. The thought sparked in her a chilling realization. Sylvia's lips curved into a subtle smile, a line of cold determination. This son could be the perfect stepping stone for her return to the pinnacle of power. The carriage drew to a gentle halt. Sylvia alighted with practiced grace, but as she looked around, she saw only a scattering of naive children playing. The influential figures were conspicuously absent. A small blonde girl scoffed, taking the lead, and the girl with red hair among them were even more arrogant. At a gathering of nobles, the most distinguished person was certainly not to be overlooked, but whether adults would tolerate their childish presence was another matter entirely. Sylvia listened to these children mimicking the insincere and affected tones of adults and couldn't help but find it amusing. In that instant, she grasped the true meaning of their words: Stuart would not be coming today. Sylvia's disappointment was palpable when she heard the red-haired girl prattling on endlessly about her palace visit. Initially, Sylvia had hoped to glean some valuable political secrets from the girl's chatter, but it turned out to be nothing more than a tedious description of the palace's ornate architecture, the carved beams, the pavilions, and towers. The conversation was utterly trivial and irrelevant. Sylvia felt a quiet sense of relief. Fortunately, she had been playing the part of a simpleton from the start. Otherwise, she would have been forced to endure these annoying children who only knew how to boast, wasting her precious time and energy on their nonsense. To think, to exact her revenge, a mere 5-year-old girl was going to have to contend with her enemy's son. This whole gathering of children sitting around bragging had yielded absolutely no useful information. Sylvia, thoroughly disillusioned, was about to stand up and leave this pointless meeting when the red-haired girl, feigning fear, dramatically asked, "Have you all heard the legend of the palace?" As soon as these words were uttered, the children's eyes lit up with excitement. They all eagerly claimed to have heard this rumor circulating among the adults. Someone whispered that Princess Stephanie had taken her own life there and that every night her ghost roamed the palace grounds. Furthermore, the rumor continued, if you recited a specific phrase silently 3 times near her pool, Princess Stephanie would grant you a single wish. However, the price for this wish was said to be the exchange of your soul. Hearing this ludicrous tale, Sylvia inwardly scoffed. How could these people possibly know? In her past life, she had been fiercely proud and resolute, never someone to resort to such a cowardly act. Lucia, her cousin, asked with curiosity, why did Princess Stephanie commit suicide? The red-haired girl responded triumphantly, it's because she tried to steal Princess Erin's engagement. Unfortunately, Lord Adonis found her to be of loose morals and publicly rejected her, humiliating her. In her shame and anger, she drowned herself in that pool. Sylvia, who had initially dismissed this whole conversation as childish jest, could no longer contain her fury. She vehemently retorted, "That's utter nonsense. Adonis was indeed Princess Stephanie's intended groom. Princess Erin was the one attempting to steal Stephanie's engagement. Princess Stephanie was genuinely fond of him, while Princess Erin was more interested in someone gentle and sweet like Adonis. Therefore, it's clear Princess Stephanie would never have committed suicide." The red-haired girl, accustomed to being unchallenged, was naturally taken aback by this contradiction. As she was about to snap back a retort, she saw Sylvia's lips curl into a slight sneer. Sylvia said with disdain, "The water in that pool barely reaches an adult's waist. Do you really think Princess Stephanie, a girl as short as you, could drown there?" As she alluded to the true circumstances of her death in her past life, a surge of hatred washed over Sylvia. Her hands clenched into fists unconsciously. In an uncontrolled outburst of emotion, she exclaimed loudly, this supposed drowning was just a fabricated excuse to deceive everyone. For a moment, all the children were stunned into complete silence. The quiet in the air was deafening. After a brief pause, Sylvia realized she had revealed too much. However, she was quick-thinking and swiftly devised a plan, deciding to double down on her act of being foolish to deflect suspicion. Just then, a luxurious carriage slowly pulled up in front of them. A cold voice cut through the silence, "Chaise." From the carriage, a boy descended with an air of authority. The boy's icy gaze fixed directly on Sylvia. He then drew his sword, pointing it directly at Sylvia and demanding, "How does the daughter of a low-district merchant know about the affairs of the palace?" Sylvia was genuinely frightened by this sudden and unexpected turn of events. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed onto the grass, her eyes wide with feigned fear and innocence. The little blonde girl, seeing the boy for the first time, boldly declared that she would marry him, only to be dismissed as a fool by him. Stuart, ignoring the blonde girl, kept his sword pointed at Sylvia and sternly questioned, "What are you saying?" This sudden drama silenced all the other children, their gazes now fixed on the unfolding scene. Lucia, standing next to Sylvia, turned deathly pale with fear and rushed forward to apologize on Sylvia's behalf. Stuart's face was dark with anger as he snapped, "I'm asking her. Do you have something to do with this?" His cold gaze returned to Sylvia, pressing, "How do you know about the secrets of the palace?" Sylvia felt a surge of delight in her heart, realizing that her opportunity had finally arrived. Stuart observed the girl's silence and initially wondered if she was a secret admirer of Princess Stephanie, but then dismissed the idea as ridiculous. At that moment, Sylvia's mind raced, strategizing how to manipulate this young pest. In her past life, Stephanie had been a seasoned politician at the apex of power, outmaneuvering even the cunning Wellington. Surely, this inexperienced boy would be easy to handle. She tilted her head and in a childlike voice asked, "How do you know this is something that cannot be spoken of?" Sylvia began to put on a dramatic performance of naive innocence. Stuart was intrigued by her performance and began to doubt his initial judgment, wondering if she did indeed have some connection to Princess Stephanie. Sylvia quickly noticed the curiosity in Stuart's eyes and then gestured with her hand, as if about to share a secret. "I'll tell you," Sylvia changed her tone abruptly, suddenly screaming at the top of her lungs, "My mommy said I'm the cutest little princess. My mommy also said that besides her, the only people who treat me like a princess are those who want to marry me." Stuart's face instantly contorted as if he had just eaten a mouthful of chili peppers. Before he could regain his composure, he heard the girl ask, "Will you marry me?" Stuart's face flushed bright red. The children present widened their eyes in shock. Stuart felt like he could dig 10 pink dream castles with his toes out of sheer embarrassment, but Sylvia grasped his wrist, preventing him from fleeing and continuing to address him. Stuart, unable to endure it any longer, abruptly shook off Sylvia's small hand and retorted, "I'm about to enroll in the Ville Academy's gymnasium. I don't have time to play house with simpletons." Sylvia feigned curiosity and asked, "Ville Academy?" He confirmed, "Yes, that's right, a place you could never enter in your entire life." Sylvia curled her lips into a cryptic smile. Initially, she hadn't planned to attend Ville Academy, but now she had changed her mind because Stuart was going there. She had been trapped in this small body in this remote town for years, and now she had finally found an opportunity. Sylvia called out to the boy. The boy turned around impatiently, asking what else she wanted. But Sylvia, her voice filled with manufactured emotion, declared, "I want to go to school with you." Knowing full well that Ville Academy was a prestigious noble institution that looked down upon merchants, the 5-year-old Sylvia insisted on attending school, her true motivation being to defeat the descendants of her ancient enemies as quickly as possible. Early the next morning, Sylvia, accompanied by her family, arrived at the Noble Academy to register. Although her parents and brother were reluctant to part with her, she was resolute because she knew this was the best path to her revenge. Just then, an impatient voice cut through the surrounding noise. Caroline, dressed in the academy uniform like all the other students, asked dismissively, "What are you doing here? What makes you so special?" The teacher seemed visibly displeased. Caroline, a fragile-looking girl, stood there helplessly, her small hands clutching 2 copper coins tightly. The people nearby whispered amongst themselves, "Her family is already ruined, and yet they want to get into this noble academy. Are they planning to fish for a rich husband?" Sylvia could no longer tolerate this. With a flick of her small hand, dozens of gold coins rained down heavily in front of the teacher, making a resounding clinking sound. She declared, "Give me 2 sets of the best uniforms. I want my dorm fully equipped with uniform items. Otherwise, this mess will reflect poorly on me." The registration process continued, and Sylvia turned to look at Caroline, blinking in a condescending manner, asking if Caroline was still there and if she would be better behaved and listen to her. Caroline raised her head, her eyes filled with shock and gratitude. It was then that Sylvia, followed by her parents and brother, said goodbye without a backward glance towards her new friend. As Sylvia crossed the threshold of the school gates, her family remained outside, their eyes welling up with tears as they watched her small figure disappear within. Her father, in a soft, almost embarrassed tone, remarked, "Our daughter is truly amazing, making friends on her very first day." Caroline, clutching Sylvia's hand tightly, repeatedly expressed her gratitude for Sylvia's help. Being an outcast, as Caroline saw herself, she was someone others typically avoided. Sylvia, overhearing this, felt a surge of indignation. She retorted that the true outcasts were those who thrived by stepping on others to elevate themselves. However, Caroline cautioned Sylvia to be mindful of her words, as trouble often stemmed from careless speech. She reminded Sylvia that nobles constituted 90% of Ville Academy's student body, with the remaining students being the offspring of wealthy magnates or influential commoners. These groups collectively dominated the school, and everyone else was insignificant, like ants in the shadow of the nobles. It was imperative, Caroline stressed, to avoid provoking these powerful figures. Sylvia's lips curved into a subtle, almost imperceptible smile of disdain. She responded that while the academy was undoubtedly a competitive environment, and she wouldn't intentionally seek conflict, it was inevitable that they would eventually cross paths with these nobles. At that moment, Caroline recalled the various competitions regularly held at the academy. Winners could earn copper badges, and accumulating enough badges offered the chance to transfer to the prestigious Imperial Capital Academy. Therefore, the badge competition was a matter of serious stakes, almost a life-or-death struggle, regardless of one's social standing. Just then, Sylvia noticed a large, bustling crowd gathered ahead. It was the very badge competition Caroline had mentioned. Without hesitation, Caroline grabbed Sylvia's hand and pulled her towards the throng, excitedly saying she'd heard this particular competition was the easiest way to earn a badge and urging Sylvia to try it. Caroline navigated them through the lively crowd, finally managing to secure a registration card for the badge competition for Sylvia. Sylvia glanced at the event details, briefly pausing in thought, but Caroline was already impatiently pulling her along, urging her to participate in a warm-up match first. Just then, the previously noisy crowd rapidly parted, creating a clear path. Sylvia's gaze lifted, cutting through the layers of people until it landed squarely on the newcomer, Stuart. He carried his usual air of arrogance and haughty disdain, as if the world itself was beneath him. Caroline, visibly terrified, paled and stammered, urging Sylvia to make way for Stuart. But Sylvia stood her ground, bravely meeting Stuart's gaze, even as Caroline beside her seemed on the verge of wetting herself with fear. Stuart was secretly intrigued, wondering if this foolish girl had shown up there because she had been paid to be present. He scoffed dismissively, "Are you also going to participate in the welcome match?" He spoke while snatching the registration card from Sylvia's hand, raising it aloft, and proclaiming loudly, "Then let me be your opponent." Sylvia blinked her wide eyes, secretly amused. This fool practically walked right into my trap, she thought. This really simplifies things. Stuart, mistaking her silence for defiance, smirked smugly. He leaned in slightly, whispering in a condescending tone, "A skilled hunter wouldn't want to be caught as prey." Upon hearing the word prey, Sylvia couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. In her previous life, she would have loathed being perceived as prey, eager to prove herself an equal opponent. But now, she intentionally wanted to play the role of weak prey, enticing this self-assured hunter to step into the trap she had carefully laid. With this in mind, she accepted Stuart's challenge without hesitation. The contest between Stuart and Sylvia officially commenced. Stuart began with arrogant force, intending to teach Sylvia a harsh lesson. He believed courage in battle was foolish for the weak, but his self-righteous attitude only struck Sylvia as utterly ridiculous. She knew deep down that true strength lay in the ability to feign weakness when necessary. This match, in fact, was a chess game, a domain where Princess Stephanie of the Euro Empire had excelled, and Sylvia was determined to control the outcome. Sylvia decided to cease her pretense, to unveil her true abilities for the first time in this new life. The chess battle between Sylvia and Stuart was about to begin. Caroline approached Sylvia with concern, whispering to her to at least try to win a single match, to avoid a humiliating defeat. But Sylvia merely toyed with a chess piece in her hand, seemingly unfazed. Stuart's sycophant, witnessing this, immediately began to taunt her, declaring that the ice piece she held was as useless as she was. Sylvia's lips curled slightly, revealing a mischievous smile. "Could ice be useless?" she retorted. "It might be stuck on the chessboard, but you can't even manage that." As soon as these words were spoken, the sycophant's face flushed crimson with anger, practically fuming. Stuart raised his hand, silencing his follower, and said, "Don't forget, we are here to seek the same glory." The first match commenced. From the game's outset, Stuart played each move decisively, with unwavering certainty, while Sylvia appeared to play carelessly, casually capturing pieces or seemingly racing to see who could move faster. To onlookers, she seemed utterly foolish. Only she knew this was a carefully orchestrated setup, deliberately losing to Stuart to bait him with the promise of shared glory and lure him deeper into her trap. As she internally strategized, Stuart made a swift and decisive checkmate, ending the first match. The referee exclaimed in surprise, as expected of young Master Stuart. Using a knight to checkmate the king. Stuart's victory was undeniable, and the second game started immediately. In a surprising move, Sylvia began to employ a tactic of building a large defensive structure, a virtual castle, with her chess pieces. Stuart, visibly panicked, turned to the referee, asking if Sylvia's defensive tactic was a foul. Unsurprisingly, Sylvia lost this round easily as well. She let out a long sigh, feigning disappointment, and said, "You're so amazing. Can you teach me how to win?" Stuart chuckled, his eyes dripping with contempt. "Sorry, I wouldn't want to embarrass my chess teacher," he retorted. Stuart's purple-haired lackey immediately chimed in, boasting that Stuart's teacher was none other than the esteemed chessmaster, Princess Erin herself. Upon hearing the familiar name, Erin, Sylvia's hand, which was holding a chess piece, froze. Memories of her past life flooded her mind. Chess is like ruling a country, it's all just strategy and manipulation. Erin, that cruel woman, always portrayed herself as a mere shadow, lamenting that while her sister had mastered governance in chess, she, Erin, had not. But in the end, it had all been lies and deceit. Sylvia couldn't help but scoff inwardly. Erin thinks she's worthy of flaunting something so blatantly stolen. Caroline, noticing Sylvia's reaction, turned pale with fear, hissing, "Stop talking. We can't offend them. If they accuse us of disrespecting the royal family." Only then did Sylvia snap back to reality, realizing she had almost spoken her thoughts aloud. Just at that moment, the whispers and rumors about the Caroline family started up again. "These words are simply unbearable," the lackey burst out laughing. "The poor girl and the nouveau riche idiot. They really are a perfect match." Sylvia's anger flared instantly. In both her lives, she had held a deep disdain for these self-satisfied people, these fools who elevated themselves by trampling on others. This time, she would not remain silent. She grasped Caroline's hand and stood up, a determined look hardening her features. "The badge must be mine." The lackey, Noiro, jumped in to speak for Stuart. "You think this is just child's play? This is the welcome competition for the Academy." Sylvia smiled faintly. "If I win, third round as she says badge will be mine," she stated, adding, "and Stuart is so impressive, surely he wouldn't dare shy away from a third round." The lackey pressed Stuart repeatedly, "Don't pay attention to that little fool." Stuart hesitated. Seeing this, Sylvia stepped forward, deliberately provoking him. "Is this how His Highness Erin's most talented student cowers? A coward?" Stuart vehemently retorted, "I just don't want to waste time." Sylvia persisted, "You're afraid that losing will bring shame to the Wellington family, right?" Hearing this, Stuart immediately flew into a rage. "I won't lose to you." Sylvia secretly rejoiced. The fish has taken the bait. The third round officially commenced. In less than a minute of play, Sylvia lost her strongest piece. Stuart couldn't help but scoff, "Still betting?" Sylvia gritted her teeth, feigning determination. "I bet you'll lose. If I win, the copper badge is mine. If I lose, all the badges I earn afterward will be yours." Stuart, perceiving this as utter foolishness, accepted the bet without hesitation. The professor announced, "Both parties agreed, the contract is established." Sylvia made a cutting remark, "You will regret it, but it's too late." As soon as the words left her lips, she seemed to transform, dominating the chessboard with extraordinary skill, cleverly cornering Stuart's king directly. "Your king is already in the hands of my queen," she exclaimed triumphantly. Stuart was instantly shocked, asking, "Did you do that on purpose? Did you plan to promote the pawn to a queen from the beginning and then trap my king with that move?" Sylvia's lips curled into a confident and proud smile. "Who said pawns are the most useless pieces?" she countered. "How do you know it isn't hiding a queen within?" A 5-year-old girl had unexpectedly outmaneuvered him. With her innate intelligence and strategic brilliance, Sylvia triumphed in the third match, defeating Stuart, who had been so sure of victory. He shouted angrily, "Stop right there. That was your true face, wasn't it?" Sylvia blinked playfully, a mischievous smile gracing her lips. Stuart, furious, swore to win back the badge. Seeing this, Sylvia waved her hand dismissively, "I'll be waiting for you." Caroline was already captivated by Sylvia's brilliant performance, exclaiming that she was incredible. But Sylvia remained unimpressed. After all, defeating a little boy was hardly an accomplishment. However, a second later, realization struck her. She was supposed to be playing the weak prey to ensnare that boy. Now, look, she had completely offended him. Sylvia felt a pang of regret. She looked at Caroline with a defeated expression and asked cautiously, "Is it still possible to return the badge to him? Or is it too late?" Caroline shook her head hopelessly. "I've heard that young Master Stuart holds grudges," she said, then asked, "Why don't you try apologizing to him?" Sylvia steeled herself, deciding to approach Stuart. But she knew Stuart was currently full of hostility toward her. She secretly mused, "This type of guy probably prefers to bully the weak rather than fight me fairly. He must be determined to win back those badges, and I just defeated him in front of everyone. This really is a disaster." Sylvia struggled to think of an excuse to appease him. Just then, someone appeared in the distance, shouting, "Stuart! Someone from the imperial capital has arrived." Stuart's previously dark expression instantly transformed into a smile. He turned his head to look at Sylvia and delivered a stern remark. "I'll be back," he exclaimed, "and I'll get revenge for today's humiliation." Sylvia's eyes instantly lit up. Someone from the imperial capital? Could it be Stuart's father, that old, ruthless Duke Wellington? The day Sylvia had been waiting for might finally be here. But her feelings were incredibly complicated. Unable to suppress her curiosity, she secretly followed Stuart to the meeting place. However, what she found were several haughty butlers. When Stuart saw the visitors, the anticipation in his eyes immediately turned to disappointment. "It's just you," he muttered, clearly deflated. He had initially hoped it was his father. Looking around, he couldn't help but ask, "My father hasn't arrived yet?" The butler replied coldly, "The Duke is busy with affairs of state. How would he have time to come to this remote place?" Sylvia's gaze fell upon the lion emblem on the butler's uniform, and understanding dawned. So, they are from Lady Wellington's family. Sending things for the illegitimate son through the wife's family butler. It seems Wellington doesn't care much about this illegitimate son. Thinking about this, other avenues of revenge began to form in Sylvia's mind. Since Wellington has chosen to be an invisible father, abandoning his son to maintain a delicate family balance, then I will harm this little Stuart and shatter that balance. Excitement flickered in Sylvia's eyes. She couldn't wait to witness the family tearing itself apart. Just imagining the scene, she couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle. Suddenly, a deep voice boomed from behind, "What are you doing here?" As soon as the words were spoken, Sylvia felt herself lifted effortlessly into the air, like a small chick. Her chest pressed against invitingly firm muscles, and she found herself facing impossibly long legs, at least 2 meters in length. "Even if you have a good body," she quipped, "you can't just grab me like this." Sylvia struggled desperately, finally managing to crane her neck to see the person's face. Her pupils widened in shock. It was Leo. He was slightly surprised to hear his name, and then gently set her back down on the floor, asking with confusion, "How do you know my name?" Sylvia looked at him, her heart swirling with a mix of emotions. How could she ever forget him? He was the man who had sworn on his life to shed his last drop of blood for her and offer his unwavering loyalty. How could she forget Leo? She just hadn't expected to reunite with him like this after her rebirth. Sylvia had finally found her old confidant, but she never imagined he would have fallen from the rank of the Empire's #1 knight to a mere academy guard. Leo remained confused, wondering how this little girl knew his name. Sylvia quickly fabricated an explanation. "You are knight #1 from the Empire," she stated. "Everyone knows you." Leo offered a gentle smile. "Now, I am just an ordinary guard captain at the academy," he corrected. Sylvia was shocked to hear this and blurted out, "You made such great contributions to the Empire. How could they send you to this remote place?" Leo reached out and softly patted Sylvia's head. "Those are adult matters," he said kindly. "Children shouldn't get involved. Perhaps staying away from that dirty place is for the best." As soon as Sylvia heard this, she understood instantly. He was here because of her. Those people couldn't let go even after her death, and as her loyal confidant, Leo, even after leading the Falcon Knights and reclaiming 3 regions for the Empire, had been exiled to this godforsaken place. Sylvia felt an incredible surge of fury, cursing those stupid and shameless individuals. Why do they all rise to the top, while I and my trusted aides die or are demoted? The more she thought about it, the more frustrated she became. Sylvia couldn't help but cry out, lamenting the miserable lives of those around her. Leo, surprised, asked, "What did you say?" Sylvia, realizing her slip, quickly turned her head and answered, "Nothing." Finishing her sentence, she took advantage of Leo's distraction and ran off with her short legs. However, she didn't get far before Leo's hand grasped her again. Leo's expression turned serious. As a student of Ville Academy, he began sternly, running around carelessly and eavesdropping on other people's conversations. What kind of behavior is this? Sylvia's heart sank with apprehension. And indeed, Leo continued, "In my capacity as captain of the Academy Guard, I will punish you by assigning you to clean the gym garden." Sylvia was furious and loudly protested, "No way. That's not fair. You can't do that." As the two were arguing, Stuart suddenly appeared, asking, "Who was making noise?" Sylvia was mortified, digging her fingers into Stuart's foot in frustration. Stuart furiously demanded to know what she was doing there. Sylvia, in a panic, tried to explain, "I was just passing by. It's not like I was trying to eavesdrop on your conversation with anyone." As soon as she said that, Stuart became even angrier, grabbing her wrist tightly. "What exactly did you hear?" he demanded. He feared his embarrassing display of disappointment had been witnessed. Sylvia, confused and not understanding the reason for his intense reaction, simply stared at him, speechless. Just as the tension reached a breaking point, Leo stepped between them, separating them with an arm. Leo coldly declared, "Violence is forbidden in the academy." "Besides," he added, his gaze fixed on Stuart, "she is a lady. Attacking the weak is despicable." Sylvia looked at the familiar figure of Leo, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. Stuart, however, seemed intimidated and didn't dare to act rashly. He could only offer a forced apology to Leo, "Sorry, it was my mistake." Sylvia watched the scene, thinking to herself, did this little boy actually change his behavior, just like that? Stuart cast a scornful look towards Sylvia, his eyes brimming with mockery. How could someone so diminutive, less than 3 feet tall, with a waist as wide as a large beer barrel at a festival, and a mind seemingly lost in her own fantasies, dare to call herself a lady? His words were like sharp daggers, piercing directly into Sylvia's heart. She was instantly enraged, swearing to herself that she would teach this impudent child a lesson. Sylvia's tears flowed freely, like water bursting from a broken dam. Stuart panicked momentarily, but his thick-skinned nature, comparable to the unyielding walls of a city, quickly returned. Within moments, he was back to acting pretentiously. "Lord Leo, you must punish this eavesdropper," he exclaimed, pointing at Sylvia. Sylvia, however, wasn't overly concerned. She knew Leo's character well. With a mouth like Stuart's, there was no way Leo would let him off easily. Indeed, Leo's face grew stern. He glared intensely at Stuart and stated coldly, "Disrespectful behavior and attacking your classmates are unacceptable. As the Academy's guard captain, I sentence you to cleaning the Academy garden." Sylvia couldn't help but chuckle quietly, but her amusement was cut short as her own misfortune arrived. Leo's sharp eyes turned towards her. "Eavesdropping is just as dishonorable. You're cleaning too." Sylvia was stunned into silence. Meanwhile, Stuart, eager to impress the Empire's greatest knight, readily accepted the punishment, without a moment's hesitation. Sylvia saw right through his act. That fool actually believed that acting obediently would earn him Duke Wellington's favor. What a ridiculous notion! She found it so amusing that she almost forgot about her own punishment until Leo's deep voice resonated again. "Lady, you should get moving as well." Sylvia gently patted Leo's shoulder with her small hand, saying, "Nicely done, Leo." Leo's heart skipped a beat. A surge of familiarity washed over him. Once, long ago, someone had patted his shoulder in precisely the same manner, so effortlessly, so naturally. For him, true victory had never been about riches, status, or the attention of women. Victory was hearing that person's soft words spoken only to him. That person, superior to all others, had looked at him, and only him, with a unique gaze unlike how she regarded the rest of the world. Victory was the hidden message within that simple touch on his shoulder. He had never desired material possessions, all he had ever wanted was to be her one and only. Leo looked at the young girl standing before him, and for a fleeting second, an absurd thought flashed through his mind: could Her Highness Stephanie have left a descendant in this world? But logic quickly prevailed, and he dismissed such a foolish notion. He knew better than anyone whether Lady Stephanie had ever had a child. Just then, Professor Zivy called out to him, "Lord Leo, what are you doing standing here?" Leo explained the punishment he had given to the two freshmen. Professor Zivy sighed in admiration. "This year's freshmen are truly exceptional." Then, with great enthusiasm, he began to recount a particularly remarkable chess game from the recent freshman tournament. The instant Leo saw the chessboard diagram, his pupils narrowed sharply. This particular playing style, why did it so closely resemble Her Highness Stephanie's? He couldn't help but ask, "Who won this match?" "A child named Sylvia," Professor Zivy replied. Sylvia, the very same girl who had just been caught eavesdropping and had lightly patted his shoulder. Even if they were related by blood, the similarity shouldn't be this uncanny. A daring idea began to take root in Leo's mind: could Her Highness Stephanie have been reborn as Sylvia? But was such an unimaginable thing even possible? Leo fell into deep thought. He had been Stephanie's closest confidant, the one she trusted above all others. Once, she had even joked, "Even if I die one day, I'd probably find a way to drag you to heaven with me." Back then, he had felt honored, but now he wondered, what if she wasn't in heaven at all? What if she had instead returned to this world? "Your Highness Stephanie, please forgive this coward's self-deceiving fantasy. Forgive me for still longing to find some trace of you in this world." "Lord Leo, are you all right?" Professor Zivy's concerned voice pulled him from his contemplation. Leo shook his head. Then, after a brief pause, he made a request. "Professor Zivy, please share any news you have about Sylvia with me in the future." Mistaking Leo for a fellow chess enthusiast, Professor Zivy readily agreed. Meanwhile, in the Academy garden, Stuart was diligently sweeping when Sylvia arrived. She greeted him, but after everything that had transpired, Stuart could barely conceal his animosity towards the girl. He clenched his teeth, turned his back to her, and ignored her, focusing intently on his chore. But instead of leaving, Sylvia only became more persistent in her presence. Annoyed by her continued presence, Stuart finally lost his temper. He seized his broom and swung it at her, yelling, "Get out of my sight!" To his utter shock, Sylvia dodged the attack with ease and landed gracefully on the broomstick. Stuart's expression darkened with anger. Sylvia spoke slowly, her voice calm and steady. "There's no need to worry about the overseers. The only person you should be concerned about is Duke Wellington." She knew better than anyone the real person beneath Wellington's public image. Then, with quiet assurance, she added, "I can make the overseers respect you. I can even make Duke Wellington take notice of you." Stuart stared at her, completely stunned. He felt utterly exposed, his fragile ego shattered, struggling to maintain his composure. Stuart huffed dismissively, stating that his father had always paid him attention and he already knew what gift to present, brushing off Sylvia's involvement. The mention of a gift immediately put Sylvia on high alert. It seemed this young boy wasn't as simple as she'd first judged. In the next instant, Stuart casually tossed his broom towards Sylvia. Though taken by surprise, she managed to catch it just in time. As she composed herself, one thought dominated her mind: revenge. There was no way she would allow Stuart to easily gain favor with Wellington. However, before she could formulate a plan, Stuart had already fled, leaving her with the cleaning duties he had abandoned. Sylvia stared at the deserted mess, momentarily dumbfounded. Just then, Leo's voice sounded from behind her: "Sylvia, have you finished cleaning the garden?" Under Leo's strict supervision, she had no alternative but to clean the entire garden herself. By the time she completed the task, night had fallen. Exhausted, she collapsed onto her bed, her body aching intensely. Only after receiving a thorough massage from Caroline did she slowly begin to recover. As Sylvia mumbled quietly, "Your technique isn't as good as Leo's," Caroline raised an eyebrow. Worried that Sylvia might struggle to focus in class the next day, Caroline voiced her concerns. Sylvia waved them away dismissively, claiming the elementary courses were so simple she could pass them effortlessly. Still, she asked casually, "What classes do we have tomorrow?" Caroline counted on her fingers: poetry, equestrian training, and painting. At the mention of painting, Caroline's face lit up with excitement. That's one of the most prestigious courses at Vale Academy. Every year, the winner of the Academy's art exhibition receives the bronze emblem. Even Duke Wellington made his name through that competition. Caroline's words triggered a memory for Sylvia. She recalled that years ago, at Vale Academy's annual art exhibition, Wellington had painted Autumn Harvest, capturing the attention of the Minister of Finance. When asked about the painting's meaning, Wellington had explained the figure depicted was his grandfather, who toiled endlessly in the fields, enduring harsh weather, only to have his entire year's harvest taken by heavy taxes. He described autumn as a season of abundance, yet also one of sorrow for farmers. Impressed by Wellington's insight and talent, the Minister of Finance took the painting back to the imperial capital and successfully advocated for a reduction in agricultural taxes. Wellington's reputation spread throughout the empire, earning him a place at the Imperial Academy. Sylvia immediately thought of Stuart, suspecting he intended to replicate Wellington's path to success. Meanwhile, in the boys' dormitory, Stuart sat silently, staring at the paints in his hands. Since his birth, his mother had constantly recounted stories about his father, placing all her hopes on him, desiring him to become as great as his father. This pressure had twisted something inside Stuart. In his heart, he believed the only way to prove he truly carried his father's bloodline was to achieve honor in the exact same manner his father had. As the art class began, the teacher lectured monotonously at the front, but Sylvia had no interest in listening. Her small head turned this way and that, scanning the room. Suddenly, her eyes brightened as she locked onto her target. Stuart was fully absorbed in his painting, unaware of Sylvia creeping up behind him, silent as a shadow. She stared intently at his canvas. Just as she had suspected, something was hidden beneath the surface layer. "What are you drawing?" Sylvia deliberately raised her voice as she simultaneously yanked away the top layer of the canvas. "What the hell are you doing?" Stuart shot up, furious. Beneath the removed layer lay a portrait of Duke Wellington. At the bottom of the painting, a dedication was written, "To my father, James Wellington." Sylvia scoffed. "So, you really are trying to copy Wellington's path to fame at the exhibition? And you're planning to give him this painting, aren't you?" Stuart's face turned bright red, feeling utterly exposed. He quickly stood up and shielded the painting, retorting, "This has nothing to do with you." Hearing the commotion, the teacher turned around and scolded Sylvia. "Sylvia! How dare you speak so irreverently about Duke Wellington?" But Sylvia refused to back down. Dodging deftly, still gripping the fabric she had torn off, she taunted, "Quit dreaming, Stuart. Wellington never even liked painting. He's not some sentimental poet lost in nostalgia, he's just a schemer through and through." The entire class was stunned into silence. Stuart lunged forward, snatched the fabric back, roaring, "What do you know?" He hated Sylvia, hated how she repeatedly trampled on his last shred of dignity. But this time, he said nothing more. Silently, he turned and left the classroom. Sylvia had provoked him intentionally, only a harsh wake-up call could force Stuart to confront the truth. His lackeys, however, were livid and vowed revenge. A little later, they found Sylvia alone and tricked her. "Professor Jerome is looking for you," they claimed, then dragged her away. Sylvia had already guessed their intentions and decided to play along. Before long, they led her to a pitch-black, empty classroom on the 4th floor. Just as they reached the door, their expressions twisted, eyes gleaming with malice. Before she could react, a sudden, hard force shoved her forward. She stumbled into the room, and before she could turn back, the heavy door slammed shut behind her with a resounding bang. Realizing what had happened, Sylvia immediately burst into dramatic sobs. From the other side of the door, one lackey sneered, "Aren't you supposed to be so tough? You still dare to go against Lord Stuart? Look at you now, scared, aren't you?" Thinking they were avenging Stuart, his followers locked Sylvia inside and left without a second thought. Little did they know, everything was proceeding exactly according to Sylvia's plan. She had intended to use the situation to her advantage, letting Professor Jerome witness her seemingly miserable state, and then use that leverage to force Stuart to agree to her terms. However, she quickly realized these two lackeys were rather dim-witted. Locking someone in a dark room was childishly simple. It seemed she would need to add a few convincing self-inflicted injuries to the scene. Meanwhile, thanks to Sylvia's careful setup, Caroline ran frantically through the halls searching for Professor Jerome, only to slam straight into a solid wall of muscle. She gasped, her face turning pale, and instinctively bowed, "I am sorry, Lord Leo." Leo looked down at the panicked girl and asked calmly, "What's got you so flustered?" Tears welled up in Caroline's eyes. "My roommate, Sylvia, is missing." Hearing this, an image of the little troublemaker who resembled Her Highness so much flashed through Leo's mind. His expression tensed as he pressed, "What happened?" Between sobs, Caroline explained everything. "A few days ago, Sylvia warned me that someone in the academy was out to get her. She told me that if she didn't return to our dorm on time after class, I had to find Professor Jerome immediately. But now she's 5 hours late." As the captain of the academy security force, Leo had a duty to act. A missing student was his responsibility. Without hesitation, he contacted the security team and ordered a full-scale search. Night had fallen by the time Leo finished combing through the campus. Finally, he arrived at a classroom on the 4th floor, his heart pounding. Without wasting a second, he kicked the door open with full force and shouted, "Sylvia!" But the only response was a deafening silence. A dreadful premonition crept up his spine. Could Sylvia have already met a tragic fate, just like Her Highness back then? A wave of guilt crushed Leo's chest. If only I hadn't been sent away to suppress that rebellion, if only I had been more vigilant and noticed their scheme, if only I had returned to the capital sooner. The more he thought, the colder his back felt. Am I truly incapable of protecting the people I care about? Just then, a faint sound echoed behind him, click. Leo spun around in an instant, eyes locked on the source.